wanted to start off with encouraging you to come up afterward. I've got a lot of artifacts here that might be interesting to you. I'll just quickly go over them. I've got a couple of displays here. One is on the alleged eyewitnesses of Noah's Ark. The other one is on literature accounts as well. This is an ibex antler that I collected at 17,000 foot level of Mount Ararat, and so ibexes live up there. I'm not sure exactly what they live on. There's not a lot of grass on the ice, but it's pretty cool. This is from Ur II, which is the ancient civilization that competed with Assyria, and it's a jade relic. That's pretty neat as well. There's several samples of lava from Mount Ararat also here. There's some cherts and some other different types of artifacts. There's a number of different fossils here that I found in the Ararat Valley as well. Some of those fossils include this one. This is my favorite. Anybody can see what that is? Sand dollar, yep, exactly. You find them at the beach. And then plastered to the back of it is actually striated there a nice clamshell also. So it's pretty cool. Again, there's a limestone sedimentary rock layer there at the valley of Mount Ararat, and so a lot of these fossils came from there. We've also got a number of samples of pottery from the Ararat area. I'm going to talk in detail about the pottery also. Then there's the book that B.J. Corbin started, The Explorers of Ararat and the Search for Noah's Ark, and that I edited and published. And we've continued that and released it basically for free, for most of it, on noahsarksearch.com. So if you just go out to that website, you'll find it. We also have some different maps and things like this. And then there's some Associates of Biblical Research, Bible and Spade magazine, where I did an article on the research that we did in 2001 also there. So you can come check that out as well. And then I love archaeology, especially. And one of the things that I love about archaeology is seeing things repeated that we aren't sure about as well. And of course I love the Ten Commandments. A lot of us have seen that as well. But I want to talk a little bit about Exodus before I get into the search for Noah's Ark also. So one of the new things that has come out of the Exodus research is that we found a lot of different texts, and these include stela as well as tomb reliefs and paintings and different papyrus as well that show exactly the parallels and repetition of the Exodus story itself. And so some of these are up here on the right-hand side. And I submit to you that these are not just myths, as people want to say, but they're actual events being repeated in the Egyptian histories, in the artifacts themselves. This one is of a Canaanite illness and different types of walls of water and the 10 plagues, etc. Then there's another one, the divine name of the Hebrew God in Exodus 3:14. I am that I am as well. That's it directly in Seti, the first tomb. And so this is, literally the Egyptians seem to be honoring the Hebrew God Yahweh for what he had done. Joseph's seduction is another one. The 10 plagues and the plague of blood in the Nile River. Joseph's 7-year famine, as well as the golden calf. And so we've got literally 37 of these different types of texts that are from Egypt that are talking about the Exodus itself now. This was just published a few years ago, this particular book in detail. This one talks about Moses' contest with Pharaoh's magicians, as well as the flight from Egypt and Moses' birth story also. Now, I want to talk specifically about where some of these different types of allusions are, or repetition of the biblical account of the Exodus. This is Thutmose III's tomb in the Valley of the Kings. They call it tomb number 34. And its antiquity, you'll see here, is 1479 to 1425. So he died in 1426, basically. The tomb is usually built during the duration of the Pharaoh's time in office, etc. But there's an interesting thing here. Over here, this arrow points to this wall. And you can see that there's all around this tomb are these different types of reliefs as well. And this one has a very interesting relief which shows a sand shore or bed, and then a level of a wall which is water in blue and water on the other side as well, and then there's a hollow area in the center. And what would that maybe remind us of? Of course, the Exodus through the Egyptian Red Sea and the escape there as well. Now let's look at this in more detail. This tomb it's called the Amduat, and this is kind of folklore in Egypt for the underworld, but I submit to you that I believe it's more than that it's actually based on the events of the Exodus itself. And if we look over here on the left side, they've got 12 hours from dusk until dawn, and it goes around and it actually shows scenes from these different 12-hour period. And it's based on this repetitive story as well. Now remember, this is, we're talking 1425 to 1479 BC. So this would be an earlier date for an Exodus. And it might be referring to a previous Pharaoh before that, not just Thutmose III. One of the things that it talks about in the hieroglyphics is a mystery mass death, which I believe is like the death of the firstborn itself. It talks about Pharaoh's pursuit of these peoples from the Semite area, initially by boat through a zigzag canal. This is the ancient Suez Canal before it was filled in and rediscovered by Napoleon and then rebuilt later on as well. Then it talks about, in hour 4, it talks about Pharaoh's boat running ashore on the canal. And so he joined his troops in the desert. And that there was some strange darkness, which I think was the pillar of cloud itself. Then in hour 5, we have the parting of the Red Sea itself, where we have the walls of water that are cut like a knife as well, and a serpentine pillar of fire overlooking the scene. In hour 7, the stars reappear, and the pillar of cloud must have left. And then in hour 10, the drowning of the Egyptian army itself. Okay? This is the Pharaoh, his scribes, his people, actually talking about, I believe, the exodus of the Israelites. And they kept it a state secret in order so that the people would not lose, he would not lose their favor, and he would be supported by them still. Hour 11 says there was an earthquake and a storm, and here's the zigzag canal, the ancient Suez Canal. Now the hieroglyphic points down here to the bottom, right there. So that one says to go to the water of the floating corpses. Okay, the water of the floating corpses in the Pharaoh's tomb. This is just fascinating, I think, as well. Now the vertical walls of water have hieroglyphics around them also. So I've cut them off here, but these are the hieroglyphics, and this is what they say. And they show a danger symbol, basically the snakes, to not go there. So on the Amduat, from the walls of water, it says, water of the floating corpses in Lower Egypt of those who mourn. And then down at the bottom, to those who are in it, their water is like fire or red. And then it also says, may you give the drowning flood to the drowned, the non-ocean abyss, so that you land or propel their bodies into the shores of the Ajib, the drowning water. May your arms bend for the waterway traveler, Ra, to pass you in peace. They are those who belong to the water of the drowned in the underworld. And then it shows the actual drowning of the Egyptian army soldiers here in the water. And you see here on the left-hand side that there's an honor guard looking over the drowned soldiers, trying to give them honor and respect as well. Now also in this tomb is, you can see a relief. This is the drowning soldiers, just a close-up of it as well. And you can imagine this scene from the Ten Commandments really on the relief. So we think about, man, I wish I could go back and see, what it was like to the eyewitnesses of the time and everything. I think that this is it right here for the Exodus. And so it's really fascinating that there's 37 of these different texts and reliefs like this as well. And here's the Pharaoh's army in their deaths with the sand on the bottom. Now this is the hieroglyphic of the living God, the fire serpent that was overlooking the water. Remember the pillar of cloud. And the living God who goes and comes is what it says, who changes shape and who opens the rectangular walled corridor in the knife sea. So imagine this rectangular knife corridor for the Israelites to walk through in the Red Sea. Then it shows a picture of the Pharaoh himself dead in the water, the body of the drowned Pharaoh in the sea in hour 6. And then this is, again, just one of 37 different types of texts and reliefs, etc., that are in Egypt that talk about this. Now, that was Thutmose III. That was around 1450 BC, right? This is 300 years later in the tombs of Ramses VI. Okay? So this was impressed on the minds of the scribes and the people and of the royal court and the pharaohs, that they needed to honor I am that I am to show this type of area as well. Now let's move forward. This is me excavating at Tal el Hammam, which is, we believe, Sodom today. And this is led by Steve Collins, Dr. Stephen Collins from Albuquerque. There is some people over near here that might want to speak as well about this excavation. But in this excavation, this is the location where the Israelites camped below Mount Nebo before they went into the Promised Land. So this is the location where a lot of the Hebrews died, that generation, and then the next generation, led by Joshua, went across the Jordan River and into the Promised Land. Here's Dr. Stephen Collins and Gary Byers from the Associates for Biblical Research, leading the excavation. Here I am excavating in a tomb. And I was excavating a tomb with Dr. Collins, and this is what we found. It's a really an ivory type of scarab, and this has got a Pharaoh's signature from about 1650 BC. And the reason I bring this up is this is the end of the Exodus, okay, where the people died, and what did they take out of Egypt? They took all the treasures of the Egyptians. And so this literally could have been in a Hebrew grave that we were excavating. And then at the time of the Exodus, which was after probably 1650 BC, this Pharaoh's scarab came with the people as well. So very interesting find also. So anyway, just wanted to throw that out there and get you thinking. Obviously, a lot more research needs to be done, but a lot of academics are not thinking about this. They just want to think about myths of the underworld with the watery graves. They don't want to think about history and what the Bible actually says. Okay, so let's talk about why we search and for Noah's Ark. And the primary reason is that Noah goes back to Genesis chapter 5. Okay, so Noah's only 9 generations away from Adam himself. So if we could find some evidence of Noah's Ark, that would provide great support for the first 11 chapters of Genesis, which is typically ridiculed a lot. So one of the things that I want to highlight here is that the heart of the mountain is more important than the surface. Just like our hearts and our minds are more important than just the surface features. And the reason I say this is because there's been over 100 expeditions since 1960 to search for the Ark on Mount Ararat. But they haven't found it yet. And I believe that's because they're looking on the surface and not below the surface as well. So, of course, I know that you know that we could fit all the animals in there, even with the studies that Answers in Genesis and ICR and all you people have done in regard to the number of dinosaurs or types of dinosaurs, would be easily supported by the Ark itself. Now, I want to talk about Urartu, okay? And what is Urartu? Where did that come from as well? So, Urartu is really from Genesis 8, chapter 8, verse 4. And it's really focused on, and the Ark came to rest on the mountains, plural, of, Hebrew only has the consonants RRT, okay? Urartu is what I believe Moses was talking about. This was the ancient civilization that competed with Assyria and the Medes and the Persians later on as well. Now, I've redrawn the map of Urartu here based on the archaeology and driving to a lot of the archaeological sites here as well. It's very large. We're talking about thousands and thousands of square miles, hundreds and hundreds of mountains. It's not just one mountain. Again, the plural in the Hebrew says it's the mountains of RRT, Urartu. It's this region as not identified as a specific mountain. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But I want to talk about just the linguistic similarities between some of the ancient names also. Notice that biblical RRT is very similar to Hurrian and to Urartu and Urartu itself and Nippur and Ararat. All of these are very, very similar. And remember that Ararat is Armenian, and their god, their primary god, was the sun god, Ar. And that's why you have Ararat, Armenia, Aras River, etc. And so you find many names like that as well. Now when we look at this, we can see that Urartu extends a long ways, but it doesn't come down into the Mesopotamian plain area. That's reserved for the Assyrians, the Neo-Assyrians, the older Assyrians, etc. That's reserved for the Assyrians. These were the hill people, the highlands people as well. Now this is the capital of Urartu on Lake Van, Tushpa Castle, and it's a very beautiful location overlooking the lake, the highest salt lake in the world. And then in regard to the writing of the Urartians, they adopted the Assyrian language. So they used the cuneiform, and these are different monuments that they have for it as well. Now, I want to be just totally blunt and honest here with you guys. I think that some of us have gotten it wrong. I love Bob Cornuke. I've worked with him on Noah's Ark research in the past and stuff, but I think he's way off on Urartu. And this is an example of it in his video, where he shows Urartu way over here in the Caspian Sea, but there's no archaeological sites whatsoever. Now, he's got his Suleiman and Sabalan mountains down here that are close to it, so he's focused on those. But he includes Ararat in his Urartu. He doesn't even include the capital, Lake Van and Tushpa Castle, in it at all. And as you can see here, here's Mount Judy down here in this region. And again, Ur 2 is not even close to it as well because it's right on the plains. So anyway, just some points about Bob's assertions there. I think he's off on his examples of archaeology. And I think this happens to Ron Wyatt. It happens to other people as well. And so we need to keep that in mind. Now this is an example of the Kurdish or Urartian mountains. And you can see it's just a network, a web of mountains. Again, there's hundreds of them as well. Now, in regard to Mount Judy, one of the problems with it is that it's not in traditional Ur 2. So when Moses wrote, the ark landed on the mountains of Ararat, or RRT, it really wasn't focused on these mountains and everything. Mount Judy is on the edge, and it's on the Mesopotamian plain, and so it'd be a natural place to stop rather than trying to work your way through all these mountains and figure out which mountain is the right one, so to speak. Okay, I want to mention that the history around this area is that Armenia came in, and this was the first Christianized nation. So this is 300, a few years before Constantine in Rome itself. And this is the capital, Ani, around 1000 AD. Now, some of the other owners of post-Ur 2 area was the Persian Armenia. So this is when the Medes and the Persians took over from the Urartians as well. That was around 500 BC, and then they made it into a satrap around 190 BC. Russian Armenia, that was 1828 as well. And then Soviet Armenia, of course, for a couple of years there in the early 1920s. And then Turkey took Ararat from the Soviet Union in 1921 at the Treaty of Kars. And this shows the changeover from the Russians owning it to the Turks and the Aras River becoming the new area. Now the head Turk, Ataturk University, who we work with for our archaeological research, this is him, and he founded the modern state of Turkey, 1923. He wanted to get away from Sharia law, he wanted to make it a secular state, and he wanted to promote if people did not adhere to the law, if they got too religious, then the generals, the military, was to take it over. So they had a coup in 1960, 1971, 1980, 2016 maybe, partial coup as well. And then the next person who runs the country now is, unfortunately, President Erdogan. And Erdogan is an Islamist supporter. He took more power when the coup occurred in 2016. He just won the elections again in 2018. And this is what he did to the people. He put tons of them in prison. He threw the criminals out of prison so that he could put his political opponents into prison. And one of those political opponents was our guy, Saim Shaheen. And unfortunately, he went to prison. And the general who supported us, who gave us a lot of the permissions that we've reached recently with Don Patton and Dick Bright, Dr. The archaeologist from Liberty University, Randall Price. And so these are the people that we work with, but unfortunately, they went into prison. Now, our guide was released, but a few days later, he died. We're not sure if there was any foul circumstances or not, but that's the way it is now. Kurdistan, of course, is a conglomeration of several different countries. And Ararat is right up in here. So this is the area around Ararat. And all the people that we work with are Kurds. So we're very pro-Kurd. It's good and bad among everybody, but we love the Kurds in general. They love freedom as well. So why should we focus on Mount Ararat? First of all, there's a lot of history and traditions around Mount Ararat. So we're talking about petrified wood across the river in Armenia, at a monastery there. There's traditions of history from previous early Christians as well. Noah's wife's tomb is there. A lot of the place names around Mount Ararat have to do with Noah's Ark and the flood itself. So these are areas of traditions that point us to the Ararat plain and to Mount Ararat itself. We also have flood evidence in the area. So we're talking about different sedimentary layers and fossils that we see here that I picked up also there. Salt mines that we've explored as well. And here's some of the fossils that I found in the limestone itself. Photos in situ here. Salt mines that are on the Aras River next to Mount Ararat. Huge deposits of salt showing some type of flood activity there as well. And then also different geysers. These are limestone-based geysers, right near Mount Ararat, and this is on the Ararat River, which is the primary source for the Euphrates River as well. Another nice geyser there. Also pillow lava on the mountain, and so you can see the typical sheen, the conchoidal type face there as well, that points us to a having water submerged in the pillow lava coming out of it there also. All right, now the scriptures say, of course, that after 75 days, there were mountains visible. Now, Ararat and Little Ararat, to the right there, are huge volcanic regions. And so we're talking about 725 cubic miles of volume. That is a humongous area. Goes from the plains down here on the bottom, 2,000 to 3,000 feet elevation, up to 17,000 feet elevation. So we're talking about a huge volume of area there as well. The ice cap is 16 square miles, so a huge amount of area there too. This is an example of seeing the ice cap from Armenia. Here's a monastery down here, and right up here is where the Eastern Plateau is. That's where Don Patton's team, Don didn't make it up the mountain, but I was leading the archaeology team up there on top, and we excavated and ran the radar surveys as well. Now we came down to here to what's called Twin Peaks. And Twin Peaks is very dangerous because you can see this is the Ararat Gorge, and you take one false move and you're down 5,000 feet. So it's pretty intense. But anyway, you can see other mountains from Mount Ararat. This is Mount Ararat to the north in Armenia from Mount Ararat. This is looking across the Aras River to the east, and you can see all the mountains in Armenia here as well. Here's looking to the northwest, and you can see other mountains here also. So there's a lot of mountains there. Now there are some challenges with Ararat. Of course, some claim that the bulk of the mountain was raised after the flood, not during it. Of course, I prefer a flood type activity, raising it up. But then there's also, we're looking for a layer of fossils right underneath the lava. And so we're still trying to find that. Now, in 1967, Bud Crawford said that he found a layer of fossils on the north side of Ararat. But that typically is not given permission to climb on, and so we're still looking at that. That was at the 14,000 foot level. And then some people claim that the pillow lava was actually under glacial ice or under snow, and that's how it came to be on Mount Ararat. But it's in a large area around Mount Ararat. It would have to be, quite a glacial area or something like that to really support that type of claim. Now, I did want to address a few people in the art research community who, again, claim that the Mount Judy is the historic place for Noah's Ark. This one here, the Ark moved northward. I didn't know it was moving after the flood, but I guess that Anne believes that it moved northward from Mount Judy to Mount Ararat around the 12th or 13th century. And then it stayed there ever since. So that was quite a move and everything. So that's what Anne believes. And then only in the 11th and the 12th centuries did the focus of investigators shift to Mount Ararat, Carroll Hill as well. Bill Krause here, a friend of mine. From about the 13th century AD, the majestic Mount Ararat claimed Noah's Ark's traditions. And even William F. Albright, Dean of Biblical Archaeologists. There's no basis in biblical geography or in later tradition for Mount Ararat. However, this is one of the early Christian historians, Philostorgius. And this is Amadon talking about him, and he says that he was, while he doesn't respect his doctrine so much, he said he was a great historian. And then he goes on, and this is what he says, is that as for the Euphrates River, it appears to take its rise in Armenia, where Mount Ararat is. The mountain is still called by that name by the Armenians. This is 425 BC, or AD, so early Christian, and nowhere near to the time frame that the people who promote Mount Judy are talking about as well. So, now, this is a copy of my display down here also. So the next reason why we would consider Mount Ararat is because of all the alleged eyewitnesses. Now, this is Noah's Ark wood, supposedly, and that's in the Armenian Ekmiadzin type area. Then this is an interesting story here about carbon wells. And the Archbishop says you may examine it, the petrified wood, etc. And I expected to see a piece of wood that was curved like the side of a boat. I remarked that I was surprised to find it was flat. And Archbishop Mesrop had a sense of humor. He instantly remarked, "You have forgotten the rudder, Mr. Wells." And so that was his response there. Now this is what it looks like today. Bill Krause traveled to Armenia. He was able to take a photograph of it also. And this is an up-front look at it also. And so you can see the grain within the wood itself. It does look like petrified wood. But again, there's no way to tell where it was provenanced from or where it came from as well. Now the next timeline in regard to alleged eyewitnesses is really the Russian expedition. And there's a lot of different families and a lot of different people who claim that there was expeditions of this. And I've interviewed a number of them, but you can see them over here on the left-hand side. And they were pretty insistent that this actually happened. One of those guys was Joseph Kulik. And he says, that he did not go inside the boat, but he said there was moss all over the boat because it was soft winter, and so there was no snow and everything. And then immediately when they killed the Russian Tsar, the army left the horses and everything, went home, and I go home. And so basically everything fell apart in the communist revolution. Floyd Gurley is this was a author of a publication, and he says that he actually talked to a Russian named Rujinsky, and she told me about the finding of the ark, but as the name of the finder, she would always break down and cry as though it was getting too close to home because her husband was killed there. This is George Hagopian, one of my favorite eyewitnesses, interviewed by many early Ark researchers. But he was an Armenian, and he said that he walked on the Ark itself, and this is what it looked like. And then it had holes on top and everything as well, similar to some of the other people like Joseph Kulik here. Now this was a general in the Russian White Army, and he wrote a letter in French to our researchers in the 1960s. And he said, "I acknowledge your letter. I remember the Russian Air Force during reconnaissance around 1915-16 noticed above the rocky heights of Mount Ararat unusual shapes and what could have been the remains of a very old construction. And then they they put an archaeological expedition together, and Mr. Pastenau even names the archaeologist, found debris of rocks which resembled the petrified remains of wood. Not really clear whether that's a real artifact or not, but that's pretty close. Our Kurdish guide went with Don Patton. He mentioned this, I believe, 1.5 or 2 years ago when he was here, down into Iraq, and they showed him a picture of what they claimed was Noah's Ark, and this is what his drawing was of it. Sticking out of the mountain, so it was covered by rock and snow, and then Russian soldiers down here at the bottom of it as well. So, very old picture. Okay. Then there's other people as well. I'll skip through some of these for the sake of time. But other Russians who claim to have been there. Also, a lot of these are not known. So a lot of my artifacts and in my research, when I was working on the book with B.J. Corbin, I went to all the expedition leaders and I interviewed them. And Errol and Violet Cummings, who authored the first books about the search for Noah's Ark, their daughter Phyllis Watson, who typed the books and who helped them with all the research, became a great friend of mine. And so I inherited a lot of her research, and Dr. John Morris's research, Pat Frost, etc. So my Bob Enyard knows that my loft in my garage has become kind of like a clearinghouse for Noah's Ark research. So some of these are not well known; they're not well documented either. Ed Davis is, of course, and then of course he has some great testimonies. Gerald Howley also on the mountain itself. Ed Bailing is one of my favorites. I love Ed Bailing's testimony. If you ever get a chance to listen to his audio tapes with Southwest Bible Church, they're fabulous and they're really fascinating. He goes into incredible detail. Says things like this: it's obviously 100 to 150 feet long. You could tell the roof sloped very gradually, maybe a 10 to 15 degree slope. And then he had a spot in the center with the length of it. Maybe it was like a catwalk. Basically, the mouth of it, we were looking at the end, was square. However, it was wider than it was tall. And it was 60 to 70 feet wide, 40 to 50 feet tall. A thing on the top of it, 10 to 15 feet wide, something like a catwalk. So very fascinating. This is 1973 time frame. Claims same time frame, again a Navy pilot, again showing a rock cliff with snow covering it, etc. So that's very interesting. Now we come to Mr. X. This is George Stevens. Mr. X was highlighted in some documentaries in the past, in the 90s and everything. And I have a love and hate vision for Mr. X, because a lot of our current research is based on this fella. And we're not sure whether he's just wrong or if he's mistaken or what exactly. But he claims to have found two different objects underneath the ice using special government-led research as well. Now we can correlate all of these different eyewitnesses to a lesser extent, but I want to talk a little bit about the expeditions and what we're doing today and what we've done recently. First of all, these are the list of different expeditions since 1960. We're talking over 100 different expeditions. Now, why didn't they find anything again? I think it's because they were looking on the surface and they weren't looking buried, because there's nothing to see on the surface. You can get out your Google imagery, Google Maps, etc. You're not going to find it. I get emails every day from people who think they found it on Google Maps. I can't explain why we don't see what the alleged eyewitnesses saw yet, but this is the reality, and so that's why I think that we ought to focus on looking into other areas. Now I want to talk a little bit about archaeological research, because I think this is very important. First of all, this is the book that we talked about, and then NoahsArkSearch.com has the book on it. If you look up here under book, It'll show you all the chapters of the books, so you can go read those yourself. In 2000, I went to Ataturk University in Erzurum and developed a relationship with Dr. Cevat Başaran and some of the deans there. And here I am typing an agreement that we came together and notarized the local city government as well. This is the agreement in Turkish, and it lists all of the expectations for myself and for our team, also for the research. Then we had to get permission from all of these different ministries: the Turkish Embassy, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Culture, the Internal Affairs, the Jandarma and the Army, etc. And we had to be sponsored by the university. This is the proper way of doing things, without bakshish and the bribes, that are more typical in different ways. So with doing that, we were able to get permission. So that was the first time since Jim Irwin to have successful permission. We had to grease the skids though, so we met people like this. President Kenan Evren. He was leader of that 1980 coup in Turkey and became the president. Okay, Alexander Haig, who was helping start a Turkish university there. The Ministry of Culture here. This is the Turkish ambassador here as well. So we had to do a lot of different things to work with a lot of different people for this. Then we brought over the rector, the president of the university, Ataturk University, to Colorado. And we had to bring his vice rector as well. And their wives also, because you have to grease the skids with them too. Here you'll see Dr. Ed Holroyd with the vice rector, Dinosaur Ridge. He's got a device to measure the uranium in the dinosaur bones there and everything. Here we're looking at different spectral images that Dr. Holroyd is showing us. Here's the National Ice Core Laboratory, fascinating place in Federal Center. You really ought to go if you get a chance. Golden Earthquake Center as well, and then the School of Mines that we met with the president for there too. We also went to the Cheyenne Mountain and the Air Force Academy, down past the Air Force Academy, and they gave us tours of all of the buildings inside Cheyenne Mountain. This is a fascinating time. This is the research that we did though. We studied all sorts of different things. We collected a lot of different archeological evidence, went into some of the different caves around Mount Ararat also. And these are some of the sites that we went to. These are Chalcolithic sites and early Bronze Age sites. Now in our dating, they may be off a little bit, but the reality is that this is very important to this type of study as well for the early Transcaucasian culture. Here's the actual sheath that I found there within this field also. Chitinle had a Chalcolithic site here also. And then the early Transcaucasian culture, this is what's really cool, is that around Mount Ararat is the center of this culture. And it's the oldest culture in the world that's homogeneous or spread out quite a long ways as well. And so some of this pottery is from that culture itself. Here you can see the different oldest cultures, and notice that 4th millennium BC, according to the current dates, the Kura Araxes culture, this early Transcaucasian culture, is the one that's actually there. There's all sorts of sites around Mount Ararat. Again, this is really focused on some of the earliest places where I believe Noah and his family came down. Here's some of the different flints. We've got a flint over here as well from Erzurum that's very similar to those. And here's the different pottery that we were really focused on. I took Dr. David Livingston, who is the founder of Associates for Biblical Research, with us. And he was the first one to identify this pottery and how important it was to the biblical events of the Noah's Ark and really coming along there. This is an interesting wall. It's all glued together, but it's full of artifacts. And so you can see some of the artifacts in here that are buried right within the wall itself for the town. And you could literally pick them out of the area also. Here's Dr. David Livingston here with us also. And here we are doing a site survey, collecting the pottery that we took to the Erzurum Museum for placement also. This is an interesting monumental sculpture statue with a sword on it also, probably from the 1000 AD time frame. All right, now I've got a few quotes here. I won't go through them in detail, but Charles Burnet is a great archaeologist for this area, and he's really focused on the centers of the settlement of this around the Ararat Valley. That's his whole focus. This is a person from the British Institute and from UCLA saying the same thing, that this homogeneous area started around Mount Ararat. And then we've got some others as well. So this one's the one from UCLA. Utter is a place right on the side of Mount Ararat also. And so my proposition is that this one ethnic group's culture, okay, the early trans-Caucasian culture, with this type of pottery or ware, were close descendants of Noah's family. They started around Mount Ararat and then they spread out into Israel, Egypt, western Anatolia, etc. All right, here's some other things that we found. A millstone to grind grain. This is a stone, a monumental stone that has 8 crosses on it. Now the Turks would not allow us to call them Armenians, which they were, but rather Byzantines. That was their term for the Armenian culture because of the issues between the two. This is where the whole stone is located in Kazan, and this is the one that Ron Wyatt promotes as an anchor stone. It was never an anchor stone. This was strictly focused on astronomical type sightings as well, and they're all over eastern Anatolia and Armenia. This is a Armenian type of pendant with Jesus and Jesus' mother on. The Ararat Ice Caves had some very interesting pottery in them as well, where people lived, and we turned this one into the Erzurum Museum. That's kind of like what they call a museum piece. We also found some cuneiform, which again was using the Assyrian language there, and then Cyclopean walls, so very large walls for the different flocks that the people had on Mount Ararat also. This is interesting. This is a shepherd from the village of Eli Koi, and see what he's got on the back of it? He's got a gun. Okay, Kurdish shepherd, gun. All they got there is goats and sheep and people, but they've also got some wild boars. And so if he sees a wild boar, he's going to go shoot that wild boar and eat it. Wait a second, he's supposed to be Muslim, but the Kurds are not strict in their Islamic focus, I guess. Kind of funny. More crosses, Armenian crosses on the gravestones, etc. Now, we went to Bayezid Castle. This is Urartu Castle, and we climbed into it, and then there was a big grave, a niche grave here, niche tomb on this area. And you can see that there's a figure here and a figure here. And this is a priest and probably a king that was buried here. And it's very hard to get to. You can see that there's no good steps to it. And it's very vertical here as well. You can see the headdress of the king that's being honored here also. And again, there's no way to get into it. So we had to have a rock climber go up and throw us down a rope to get up to it. So that was a very interesting endeavor. There were a number of different archaeological tombs in there, niche tombs. And then there was also, you can see the ropes here and the headlamps that we had. But there was also a bottom cistern in it. And at the bottom of the cistern was a sling stone. So this is like a slingshot stone. It could be similar to what David or some of the other Israelites used as well, and it was used for fighting the other battles there as well. Now on the other side of the mountain, Ahora Gorge, there's a town called Ahora, which is the place of the first vineyard, supposedly. And they also have monumental stones for their different graves as well. They also have holes in those stones. Here at the top of this gravestone is a hole. And again, I think this stone has been repurposed. Originally, the Armenians used it as an astronomical marker, to try to calculate the days and the times and the seasons. And then they reused it as a gravestone with crosses here as well. And Dr. Paris Hironi, who's was a great theoretician and physicist, actually calculated a lot of the astronomy for some of the different areas within Armenia that this goes to as well. So we focused on a lot of the archaeology. This was my focus, so then we moved on to different caves within Mount Ararat. This is in the Ahora Gorge region. Ed Davis talked about this as well. In 1840, there was a catastrophe where a lot of the snow and water had melted, and it built up and it fell down the gorge, causing earthquakes and this huge area of debris that came down the gorge. It destroyed a lot of the town of Ahora and killed a lot of the people there as well. This is Jacob's tomb. These are the old Kurdish people coming to give honor to Jacob there. This is some of the early explorers looking at that also. And then this is Jacob's well. And the theory is that if you bring a nice little napkin or something, then the girls would be fertile and have a child. And so they would, when they came to get water, they would put those up there on the tree there also. This is Karada Mountain. Lots of different Armenian houses. This is called the House of Shem. Again, we don't know if this really was Shem's house, but there's an altar there with steps as well, and we think of Noah and the altar that he built. There's also rock art on some of the inscriptions there. Hard to tell exactly what the inscriptions are. There's millstones, but a fascinating area from an archaeological perspective. This is an Armenian church from the 600s. That's there as well on the slopes of Mount Ararat. Now when we get back to the hotel, this is what we do. We wash the pottery. So here we are. They have stand-up showers, so no bathtubs. And we have to take buckets of water, and then we're washing all the pottery that we collected. So all of the pottery, we had to label it, and so we would write on it with permanent ink, and then put nail polish on it to seal it. And that way, it would be permanently on there. This is Bob Cornuke. I don't know if you remember Bob Cornuke, but he's based out of Crested Butte, Colorado, and he's a great climber as well. Then we would take the pottery, we would catalog it, we would organize it based on the buckets that we had it in. We documented, which baskets, which locations it came from, etc., and then put that all into the computer. And you can see some of the different areas. You can see some of the nail polish and the cataloging that we did. I've got a curvature symbol here, a tool that measures the curve of the pottery itself, and this is what we use to help identify this in the Turkish reports and the English reports also. All right, so now we're moving on past archaeology to subsurface. Okay, so I love archaeology. Dr. Randall Price let me, kind of do all the archaeology work, and then he focused on subsurface in general, and we worked together on that. This is a 2010 team. You can see Don Patton here, Dick Bright. This is Cowboy, Don Campbell, Dr. John Bryant from Texas, Kevin DeVries, who's a great climber, Dr. Randall Price, etc. Okay, here's our 2011 team, and so here Jean-Louis Blackburn, military guy, a great friend of Don Patton's, a good photographer and videographer. Dick Bright there, who's like the bulldog of arc research. Randall Price, Kevin again, myself, Holt Condren, a great climber as well, and then assorted Kurds and other people. Okay, so we got permission each year, not the way that I did it, where I had to wine and dine from the presidents to ministers to ambassadors to everybody under the sun, but we paid back sheesh. Okay, so that's happened the last 5-10 years. Okay, and it's worked really well for Dick and for our team. So it's a little simpler to do that if you can get the right people. Unfortunately, the general's in prison now. That complicates this picture a little bit more. So our guide is dead, and so he's no longer around to help us. So that's a challenge. However, over the 2010 to 12, basically, because they were only up there for a day or two on 2009, we've done a lot of things. So archeological research that I just showed you about, that I was focused on as well. 80 GPR surveys. Okay, so this is dragging the radar across the mountain, searching for what's underneath it to try to analyze if there's any anomalies there. Talk about that in detail. We had 2 GPRs there. One was Dr. John Bryant and his cohort in crime, Jose Renteria, great guy. And then myself, I had the other GPR as well. And then we did ice auger drill holes. So these ice augers, you're drilling down at a fixed point and going straight down to see if you can hit something, an anomaly, etc. So if we have an idea that there's an anomaly there, we want to hit something. And Don Cowboy Campbell was focused on that. Then we did OMAP, electrical resistivity surveys. We did a lot of those. We didn't spend a ton of time compared to the radar with them, but they didn't work. And so it's disappointing. Did the research, but they really didn't pan out. Didn't work as well as Dr. Bryant thought they would, and so that was a bummer. Then, let's see here. We did 3 ice square archeological excavations. And so different levels of depth, 15 feet, 26 feet, and 34 feet. One was about 3 or 4 feet across, so very small. The other 2 were 8 by 8 squares, and then as we went down, say 15 or 20 feet, then we made it smaller and smaller to get further down. This is blue ice. If you've ever dug through blue ice, it's not so easy. It's very, very hard. It's so compact and dense. It's almost like water, but yet just super hard. Okay, and then Randall and I were focused on those. This is going up the mountain, so this is a shepherd with his goat here. And we had lots of challenges. Terrain is difficult. Of course, like climbing a 14er, but 17er in this case. Hidden crevasses. So the first day I was up on the mountain, I fell into a crevasse and went down to about here. And fortunately, Holt and Kevin were right there and they pulled me out. So that was good. We marked it with a flag and tried to stay away from it. Then there's lots of wind and whiteouts, and every afternoon the wind and the storms come in. And so we work about 9 o'clock to 1 or 2 in the afternoon, and then we go to our tents, and you're in your tent and just getting blistered by the wind and the hail and the snow and the snow flying through. It's pretty crazy. And then there's only about 60% oxygen at 17,000 feet. So it's not like you're thinking quite correctly. I told Bob once that I actually wrote my wife and kids a poem. And that's not me. That's not who I am. You know, normally write poems. And so but on the top of Mount Ararat, looking down on the Aras River Valley, imagining, you know, the Noah's family coming and starting over again. And then terrorists. Now in this case, these were the Kurds who were building a road up the mountain, and the Turks didn't like it, and so they bombed the Kurds' vehicles and everything to stop them from doing it. So it goes both directions, I guess, in regard to that. These are the Kurdish Sherpas, so to speak, our friends that are bringing up materials, so different tents and things like that. People like Don and Dick, you know, have a hard time getting up the mountain, and so they need help, you know, with their supplies and things like that. This is typical. This is a generator. You think, man, you got a generator, all right, got some kerosene in there, you get some heat and everything. This is what we use it for charging our batteries, charging our phones, charging our computers, a gold zero there, battery. So that's what it's typically used for. Here's the ascent up to the summit. So this is coming up from the south west, and this is the summit up here on the very top. And over here is the Western Plateau. 16 square miles of ice, that's a lot of ice, about up to 300 feet deep. So it's very deep. Again, you don't want to get caught in a crevasse. The worst crevasses are on the north and east side. This is looking over to Little Ararat. So we're at the top, looking over there. Here's a snowstorm. You can see the snow with the ice axes, and the snow has just coated them across, and this is the tent right here. Dick had to be dragged out of his tent, and he was half comatose. You know, he wasn't with it. We had to wake him up and get him going because he was not doing well at all. This is the excavation of the first of the three squares. Now, why are we digging here? That's a key question. Why are we digging here? We're digging here because of Mr. X. X marks the spot, and he said, this is where you need to dig. I give you the GPS coordinates, you go dig right there. So they started digging, and then they claim that the GPS coordinates were off. Okay, 70 feet. So they do all this digging down to here. Here's a little ice box and everything, and they dig down there, and they get down 15, 18 feet, and didn't find anything. And then he says, well, your GPS must be off. And so you're 70 feet off. So we come back to next year, okay? And I tell Randall at the Near East Archaeological Society, I still remember, I tell Randall, you got to use subsurface surveys. Why are you going through all this effort of digging through blue ice and not looking underneath? And so he said, hey, that's a good idea. Let's do that. And so the next year we brought Dr. Bryant and started doing surveys. And so here's a radar survey coming along. And there's Kevin pulling the radar, and Dr. Bryant's got some data on a disk there. He's plugging it into the computer, and he finds out they try the resistivity tests that don't work again, but he gets this mapping, and we find that there's this anomaly here, over here, a few feet away from where the original one was. Okay, so that's 2010. Now we beef up the team, and we go toward 2011. Now here is some of the GPR radar services, or surveys, and you can see they put it into more graphical format. Here's the anomaly here. The problem is it's not the size of an arc. Okay, it's several feet wide and 35 feet long. And so I'm like, it's interesting, but I'm not sure. It just doesn't look like what those eyewitnesses were telling us about. And so anyway, it goes down pretty deep. So 80 feet deep there in the middle, and things like that. We get some nice areas, but then Mr. X says, well, I can pinpoint it closer. So there's one anomaly here, and there's one anomaly over here. And they're both on the Eastern Plateau. And so we go back again to the Eastern Plateau to do more research. The Eastern Summit is, the Eastern Plateau is just on the other side toward Little Ararat. You can see Little Ararat over here, so we're behind this. All right, so this is on top of the Twin Peaks, looking down at the Ararat Gorge, and we're using the ground-penetrating radar, and we're focused on that. Now here we are with the beefed-up team, 2011, and Jose is calibrating the radar, etc. You've got a GPS up here, and they can never get the GPS to coordinate with the other GPS units. This is a very sophisticated device. And so we're not sure that we're in the exact right spot that Mr. X is claiming. And so we just decided we're going to do whatever we can, radar-wise, do as many scans as we can, and then go on from there. So we get some of the radar scans done. We've got 80 feet depth of ice. That's a lot of ice, a lot of blue ice to dig around in. Everything. We put out the flags. Again, this is on top of the world, I say. This is looking down to the Ararat River Valley. You can see it's greenish, so it's very nicely done there. And that's where Armenia is, and Azerbaijan, and Iran is further down here to the right. All right, these clouds are disconcerting. It's like being on a 14er when the storm starts rolling in, and it's dangerous. And then you're up there all day long and in the tent hiding out basically. Here's the guys that are setting up the different tests and looking down again to the Ararat River Valley there. Beautiful, clear day. We see the anomaly again on the radar, 2011. Okay, so is it an artifact or is this a false positive? That's the question. And so we start drilling. So we take out our augers, and you've got this kerosene auger on top, and it's turning the drill. And we find out very quickly that as this turns down into the ice, what happens to the ice? The ice starts getting warmer. Friction occurs, right? And if we leave it for just a couple seconds, what happens? It starts congealing together and freezing. And then we've got, you'll see these meter-long drills, bits, and so we get 6 of those down there. We're down 18, 20 feet. All of a sudden it's stuck. How do you get it back out? Yeah. You yank on it, you pull, it ain't budging. Blue ice? I mean, it's a mess. And so you learn very quickly that you got to do something different here. And then when you hit something, why did it stop? Was it frozen? Or was that bedrock? Did you hit the bottom? Or did you hit an anomaly? We're not sure. But we're making assumptions based on Mr. X, this anomaly that we do see on the radar, okay? And, we're losing our drill bits very quickly. So then what do we have to do? We got to ship them from America over to Mount Ararat. If we're up there, you can't wait for a week to get them up there, and then who's going to bring them up? You got to coordinate all the UPS and FedEx. You got to get it through customs. What are you doing shipping drill bits, to Turkey, Eastern Turkey? So anyway, it's kind of a mess there. So that's one area of research that's a challenge. Now, we finally decided, based on this this anomaly, that we're going to dig, okay, 2011. So I set up the square, okay, and then there's the coordinating devices right down there for the other pin that goes on the north side of it. And we scoop it out down to the blue ice, and then we start chipping away around the area because we want to put a tent over it. Because if the snow falls into it, then it'll fill it up, the hole up again. So we need a tent covering over it. And so the Kurds are chipping that out. Now Holt's putting the tent together, this Mountain Hardware huge tent, half dome, and then we're going to put that thing up. Cowboy is getting all the oil or kerosene. It's a half mix for the chainsaws. So that's kerosene and oil. And then we start chainsawing through it. So we're going crisscross here, and we're spitting out the ice. You can see the ice coming out there as well. We try to go down about 10 inches to 12 inches. Ideal is if we could get out a kind of a cube foot type ice cube there. And then we're taking those ice cubes and we're trying to put them around the tent to hold it down. We don't want it blowing away, and then it's just going to fill in with the snowstorms as well. So we fill around the tent itself. Then we're starting to excavate down, and we're throwing out the ice. Now as you get down deeper, you got a problem. How are we getting the ice up 20, 30 feet, let alone 10 or 12 feet? Here's the hole. This is sunlight. This is the hole that he's trying to throw that thing through. And so, it's kind of like, a game almost, to not let it fall down onto anybody else, because that'll kill somebody if it's down there deep enough. And so then we started using pulley systems. So Don Patton had this great idea. He said, why don't we put kind of like a swing set at the top of it. And so the Kurds carried the swing set up the mountain and to the top, and then put a pulley at the very top with coils, and then they pulled up the ice bags to the hole. And so it was a very clever idea by Don. And then once you get it out of the hole, you got to keep throwing it down the mountain, because otherwise it's going to just create a big dump, and you don't want to have that completely done. Here's all our tents, and here's this year we had a nice big tent for cooking and things like that as well. Now, unfortunately, we don't get food up there all the time. So you better brought some candy bars or something with you, or else you may not have some food for a while, because the Kurds are not real good at constantly coming up. And they don't like to stay there. They're like, we ain't living up here. You guys are crazy. We're going back down the mountain each day. So they come up at 5 in the morning. They come up and work from 8 to 1, and then they're going back down the mountain. They're not going to live in those snowstorms and stuff. So very interesting. And then this is one of the auger holes filled up with water. So if it gets above 32 degrees, of course, you start getting water. The same problem with in the squares itself. You got to get the water out. We had to pump it out a number of times. But this is where we break through the ice and try to get water there. Otherwise, we'd have to take the snow and melt it to have snow melt water. I had some videos, but we don't have time for those, and I don't have my computer set up here. It's back there. These are the radar surveys that we did. So we did a total survey length of 650 feet approximately in 2011. That's quite a few radar surveys. And you can see the area. This is a big area of the Eastern Plateau. Not everything, but a big area. Now, of course, Mr. X says, well, we dug over here, but we're off just a little bit, he says. And so, we're not seeing what he's seeing. He's got this, unknown type view, and we're placing our faith in this guy that we're not seeing any evidence for yet. So we're hoping, but we're not seeing it. So we get an idea, hey, we did all these surveys. And Mr. X, you claim you're seeing these things. Next year, we're going to call you on the satellite phone, real time. And we're going to send John Bryant out on the ice cap. We're all going to sit in our tents. Rex is going to take photos, and we're going to put this phone right where you say the anomaly is, where to dig. And so, Mr. X says, we're gonna go here, and we're gonna John, you need to move over a few feet that way. And again, we see this anomaly here as well again. Here's another view of it. Here's our dig site here. And then we've got the anomaly over here as well. We're not seeing a big part of it though in this view. And then, is the clicker dead?
Yeah, you just go 2 more.
Okay, here we go. Just taking a while. So anyway, we dug down there, and let me see if it's going to have to catch up.
They're all blank.
Sorry?
They are all blank.
I think this one probably has a video on it or something. It's just taking a while to load. Probably. There we go. Okay, so we had to get oxygen out of the bottom of this. When you're down 20, 30 feet, of course, the chainsaw exhaust is dangerous. Carbon monoxide can kill a person. And so we had to pump the air out of the bottom of the square to get it out. And we're still throwing out more ice here as well. And then we find drill bits, goes down, and it pulls up some type of muddy substance that looks like little pellets. And we don't know if they're organic or inorganic or what, but everybody gets excited about that. And so they want to dig there as well. Just looking down the Ahura Gorge here, it's Armenia. Beautiful day. This is looking on Ahura. This is literally looking from 16,700 feet down to 5,000 feet. So you're talking about 11,000 vertical feet taking a photograph of the village. It's pretty amazing. Little Ararat, you can see the vertical area as well. And then 2012, our focus is on GPR again with enhanced 3D, and then on drilling with 6-inch cores. And here's our 3D that Dr. Bryant is showing us. Here we are with Randall and Don and Dr. Bryant at Moraine camping. And then we send up Dr. Bryant out of the tents to talk to Mr. X. And he says, right here, put the flag down right here. This is where you need to dig and everything. So we do digging, we do drilling, we do radar. We find some dirty stuff in the ice that comes out of the drills. We're not sure what that is, but we keep moving this direction. And Mr. X keeps moving us a little further and further this way. We get the auger stuck, the drill stuck in the ice down about 35 feet. And so we think, this is the place to dig. So we put the excavation square over it. We put up the tent again. We got the ice dump moving. We've got the air going out. We're taking samples along all the way down the ice square and everything. And we get down to the very bottom, the last drill. And they get down to the bottom of the last drill, and it falls over. And there's nothing there. And so it's just super disappointing, because Mr. X is wrong again. And there's nothing there. We use the drill to go down deeper. We go down at angles, this way, that way. Maybe it's over there, And so now we're down 35 feet, and we're going different directions. And so he says, oh, well, you're 24 feet off, 25 feet off to the north. And so we're like, well, we're not going to dig another square. Let's just dig a tunnel over. And so we start digging this tunnel to the north to where he says it is now. And it's like, trying to find a, wild goose or something. Anyway, so we start digging this tunnel, and the weather cuts in. We come down, and we start looking at the research. And this is the type of thing that Mr. X is telling us. Okay, and I'm just being blunt level honest here. you know, don't tell Don, but you know, he trusts the guy totally. But he's talking about, you know, a shape here, 120 feet long, 172 feet wide, another anomaly 80 feet by 68 and stuff, and we can't hit anything. And we can't see much on the radar. And so something's not mixing up quite right here as well. So, so anyway, we tell Dr. Saleh, who's a Turkish archaeologist or a geologist, to try to analyze some of the data. Of course, we did a lot of research. It was by far and away the most research ever done on Mount Ararat, I'm convinced. Very detailed, however, it was not, you know, what we really wanted. That November, we sent the Kurds back up there to finish the tunnel to the location, and it was too bad, the weather was too bad, they couldn't get up the mountain. So the tunnel's gone, the square's gone, the tents are gone, and now, you know, everything's kind of bad. So I've got some analysis to do here. You know, what went wrong, what went right, etc. And I don't know why, but unfortunately, a lot of our team doesn't point back to Mr. X. But I'm pointing back to Mr. X. I'm saying, what gives here? There's something wrong here. Is he a fraud? Or worse, is he lying to us? Or is he just way off on where he sees? How can Dr. Bryant be standing right here, looking down, so plants the flag there, and he's the only one on the mountain standing, and the guy says, I see you, and he's wrong. So I don't know. That's very disappointing to me for all the work that we've done. Also, there are no anomalies on the Eastern Plateau period. So the good news is that we've researched the Eastern Plateau. It's done, finalized, kaput. We're done with that, in my opinion. And the false positive, the anomaly that we did find on the Eastern Plateau, I'm convinced that it was that same crevasse that I fell in the first year, and that they pulled me out of, because it's right at that spot, and it goes at an angle in the same direction. And so the other climbers think that that's right too. Now, Dr. Bryant hasn't said, yeah, I think that's right, but it makes sense. The radars are so sensitive now that they can tell differences in the ice structure itself. And so I think it was this lateral, you know, 8 foot wide by 40 foot long crevasse that was going down there, and it had different type of ice, or it had melted, and just a different structure as well. So, and it was very thin, so it was almost like it was a sheet of something, a sheet of ice. So that's my personal view. Also, drills have to be kept moving, or else they freeze in the blue ice like we talked about. The drill debris was inorganic or remnants of animal feces, so it wasn't anything special. People got real excited about it, took it back for carbon-14 testing, things like this, and that didn't work out real well, unfortunately. However, it's real good research that we did, I think, in a lot of ways. Next one is, it is really, really hard to excavate in blue ice. Don't recommend it to anybody. We need to minimize that at the, you know, as much as possible. Unless you've got super excellent GPR analysis, that this is a big object, I just don't recommend it. It takes way too much time, too much effort and everything. And then, so the locations that I believe are left to search on Mount Ararat are the Western Plateau, okay, which has never been radar surveyed. B.J. Corbin tried it in 1988, 89. The GPR did not work. Bob Garby had a homemade GPR, and it measured how deep the ice was, up to 300 feet deep, but it didn't show anything. So Western Plateau is a good area. The saddle between the peaks, while it's not moving ice as much, it's still a potential, so I think that that should be done in the long run as well. And then the edges of glaciers for burials. Okay, if you look at some of the some of the drawings of the eyewitnesses, you see the cliff on the edge and how there's a abutment to a larger piece of the mountain, and could easily be covering it either with ice or rocks, or maybe somebody pushed rocks onto the top of the ark to hide it there as well. So I think the edges and the saddles. Now, the edges is interesting because what's happened since then? Okay, the Kurdish authorities approached our team.
Is he feeding you guys? Is it satellite stuff? And why does Don Patton trust him so much?
Okay, so the first question, George Stevens worked for the military. He, as I understood it, actually helped the U-2 pilot get back across. That was Gary, what's his name? That was
Howard?
Yeah, and actually was on the bridge there with him, I think. So he was very well connected in the military. He was a contractor. He had very good eyesight, and back in the day, this is like 60s, 70s, 80s, they didn't have the geospatial programs that we do today. And they would use the eyesight to show see variations in the density of the subsurface photographs. And so he was very good at that. Now, how much contracting tie-in he has today, I have no idea. However, he's very big with Don and with others in regard to finding gold in the mountains of the West and things like that. So spectral type analysis to try to find those types of things as well. Don, I think, is a fairly trusting person, and when somebody's helped you in the past, you want to try to trust them again. But when I came down the mountain and I realized, what had happened, my immediate blame went to Mr. X, and I don't understand why the rest of our team doesn't, at least question that. Now maybe he's off. Maybe he's off to the saddle. The saddle's only a few hundred feet away. Maybe there's an anomaly there. I don't know. But when you're on the phone and it says it's right there, and he sees you on the ice, he says, "I see you, John. I saw you guys come up the mountain."
From the satellite?
Yeah, he said, "I saw you guys. There were 7 of you. You came up the mountain. It was Rex and Kevin and Holt and John. You came up the mountain, and I want all your guys to lay down in the tents, and then I'm going to tell." So I'm talking to you. I know you're standing outside, and I can see. So anyway, that's the reality. So, any other questions? Yeah.
I'm wondering, and I'm not familiar with, geology or anything, but I do know that we have a magnetic field in the earth, and our compasses point to an iron deposit or something,
Right.
You would know, in Canada or northern Canada. Is there something on the mountain that is making the ground penetrating radar off, or is there, that's one question, or is the Russians are involved? Not that I believe they're involved in every bit of our lives, but could there be some scrambling with, I don't know what they would use to scramble your GPS signals?
Yeah.
I don't know, just
So
things I'm thinking about.
it's a great question, especially because the Trimble GPS device, the tall one that was connected to the GPR, is the one that it triangulates the different horizons. And we were told that there are some issues with the military scrambling signals around the Mount Ararat summit if you're using something as sophisticated as the Trimble GPS. However, that being said, you saw the pictures of the radar lines that we went on this. That's my iPhone GPS. And that's using just the iPhone and mapping it to Google Maps. So my iPhone GPSs and the other guys', I believe, were working. It was just the Trimble one that was not and had problems. Not exactly sure why. We were told that there may be some interference from the military. There is like eight military bases around Mount Ararat because it's on the border with Armenia, and the border is closed. They do not let traffic through one way or the other. It's nothing like the Mexican border. It's a closed area. In fact, when I went to an archaeological site next to the border, the Aras River is the border, right? And I was down there near the Aras River, and I was taking photos of the archaeological site, and all of a sudden the military came up and said, "What are you doing? What are you doing on the border here?" and stuff, taking photos. They thought I was a spy for Armenia, trying to check out, the defenses along the border. And so then I was taken back to the military base and questioned. They looked at my photographs and stuff. They saw that I had, this is a tent post in lava that was created. And I had one like that and another one like this or something. And they said, you can keep that one, but we're taking the other one. And then they felt satisfied. They went through all my photographs and saw that I was primarily focused on archaeology. Anyway, good question. Any other questions?
I have 3 questions.
Okay.
So where do you think the Ark is, and when's your next mission? And if it's not where you're looking, then where do you think the next place to look is?
Good questions. So I think that my best guess is on the western side of the glaciers coming down. Some of the eyewitnesses claim that they went up on the northwest side of the mountain, and so that would coincide with it. The west side also is not accessible normally for tourists. So there's one tourist route that the climbers go up the mountain. It's on the southwest side, and you can't see the west side from it at all. And so it's kind of hidden, and I think that if anybody knows of the Ark being there, the southwest route is a good one to keep people away from the west side as well. Now, if that one doesn't pan out, then I would go to the western plateau to do the radar surveys. Does that help? All right.
All right, well, let's have a round of applause for Rev.
The covenant between me and you and all living creatures of every kind. The Lord smelled the pleasing aroma and said in his heart, "Never again will I curse the ground because of humans, even though every inclination of the human heart is evil from childhood, and never again will I destroy all living creatures as I have done." So thanks a lot for your attention. Sorry I went so long, and I'll be up here if you have any questions.
Well, it's pretty late, but we could break for this thing. We could break for refreshments right now. Or we could do some questions and answers. I'd opt for doing some questions and answers. It's probably more